these schools. Could it possibly be something to do with trading on privilege? Is that something that maybe some people find interesting? Could it be to avoid people that they don't want their children to be hanging out with? Could it be to give them access to networks that children in comprehensive schools don't have access to? Are potentially these some of the reasons why children in some private schools get into top universities more than children in comprehensive schools? Could these be some of these reasons why children in private schools get into top jobs and get into these top networks more than children from private schools? Could it be because their colleague children in the schools come from wealthier backgrounds, wealthier families who have those connections, and those connections are actually the reasons why private schools are in being, not to give kids a better education? Can I continue? Yes, sorry. Go.
Well, Mr. President, perhaps it's because education is not about the overinflated grades that we now get from our A-level system, and education encompasses a lot more, which perhaps these private schools are better able to provide than your rather odd economic calculations.
Yes, obviously, if you mean connections, yes, private schools can provide. If there's certain things I would agree. Private schools can provide much better than comprehensive. They can provide better connections, okay? They can provide better networks. They can provide better routes into top universities because obviously they have those connections. They can provide better education in didgeridoo playing. All those things are things private schools do much better than state schools. What they don't do better than state schools, what the data shows, is actually raise pupil achievement, okay? That's not what they do. Let me go on. Let me go on to something else that comes from our teachers, because before I came here today, I spoke to a lot of our teachers, including a lot of our teachers who came to this Augusta University, and asked them, what do they think of this motion? And I tell you something that I've heard from so many of our teachers over the last few years. And the thing I've heard from so many of our teachers might surprise some people sitting here today, which is, I am teaching children in my school who are so much smarter, work so much harder than the kids I went to university at Cambridge with. Why aren't they even thinking to go to Cambridge? Why aren't they even contemplating going to Cambridge? It's not because of their academic ability. They're really smart. It's not because of their hard work ethic. They have great work ethic. It's because they don't have those networks, right? It's because they don't have the connections that some of these private schools can give people. And I'm running out of time, so I think So what I would say to the point there, I think a point was made recently about parents living in Hackney or Camden. What I would say is I just went to a Hackney school this week where Teach First Teachers are teaching, where our children are getting a fantastic education, okay? So saying that people are segmented, I wasn't sure which you were talking to. Which is better, Camden or Hackney? I've seen great schools in both local authorities. So I would say people are putting down some very great comprehensive schools without actually knowing a lot about them. And the last argument that was just made, freedom of choice, I would argue quite strongly, private schools prevent freedom of choice. They prevent freedom of choice. What we need to think, is education like any other good? Is it something where parents can buy better toys for their parents if they're wealthy? Yes, they can. Can parents buy better clothes for their children if they're wealthy? Yes, they can. Can they buy better food for their children if they're wealthy? Yes, they can. Better housing for their children if they're wealthy? Yes, they can. We all agree we live in a good capitalist society where all these things are possible. Is there something different about education? Or is education just like any of those other goods? I would argue that in a civilized society, going back thousands of years, the belief has been education is something different. And I looked for the most earliest example of this, and what I found was 1,800 years ago, a Talmudic scholar, a number of rabbis who argued basically the importance of education in the society, saying it was something society had to contribute if the families couldn't contribute, and it had to be of at least equal or better quality than what society could contribute. What we've seen over the last 18 years throughout the world in civilized society is that belief is now all throughout the world in civilized society. It might not be here in Britain yet, but it will get here. The belief that education is something that all children need to be able to achieve at the highest level. And it's a key obligation for society as something special that opens opportunities as a basic human right. And it needs to be seen as a basic human right. This is not extra toys if you have wealthy parents. This is a basic human right to get the best quality education, not the best quality education because your parents have received a very good bonus that year. Allowing growth and potential. And that gets back to the whole idea of networks. Because actually, if you separate out these networks, which is what's happening now, why kids are going to private schools, the kids who are going to private schools are getting those networks, which children from other schools are not able to get, not allowing their growth to receive their full potential, which is the key opportunity that education unlocks in the young people. And now you could say that some of these schools are not made available to the public. And now one of the things I've also heard here around academies and grammar schools. What I would argue is academies and grammar schools are not part of today's arguments. And people here who say Eton is a great place, it's steeped in British history, there's so many traditions, you can learn the didgeridoo there, you can do all sorts of fantastic things there. I would say, great, keep it. We don't want to lose that. We don't want to lose that magic. Make it an academy. Why don't we make it an academy tomorrow? It could keep that ethos, right? Why does it have to be open to only people who can afford £26,000 a year? If you really want to go extreme, why not make it a grammar school? Why not make it a grammar school and say, fine, okay? We all agree different children should go to different schools. Why not open it up to children who have the best academic ability to go to Eton? Yes. How many? How many? So I've just heard 3%, okay? So 3%. That's potential. The point is, I'm seeing my time's up, but the last point I will make is schools like Eton and many other private schools, children get into them not because of their intelligence, not because of their ability, not because they're the most amazing kids in the world. They get into them because of the size of their parents' bonus. And if we think that that's the sort of society we want to live in, then that's going back to the feudal society of noble people who are children of noble people, peasants who are children of peasants. And that's wrong. And that's a public nuisance.
Very much indeed for his remarks. And our next speaker in opposition tonight is the Director of Civitas, the Institute for the Study of Civil Society. I'd like to call Mr. David Green.
A recent study found that the best predictors of low attainment in state schools were reading the Sun and being called Wayne. Now, what does that have to do with this debate about in private schools? It'll become obvious in a second. This debate hinges on one vital question, and actually the ideals that I have and that you say you have are the same. That is, how can we ensure that children from the poorest backgrounds have the best possible chance of developing their talents? That is what I want as well. There's two rival approaches to answering that question. I'm going to call one collectivist and one liberal. The crucial difference is this: under a liberal system, anyone can set up a school so long as the parents want them to. Under a collectivist regime, you've got to get permission from the authorities to set up a school. The authorities represent the existing schools, some of them failing. They don't want anybody showing them up. Remember that it's the current system of state monopoly that is failing children from disadvantaged backgrounds. It's only today the Ofsted report has come out pointing out that 1 in 5 children in primary school are not up to the acceptable standard in English and maths, and only about half of children at 16 attain good GCSEs according to the government's own criterion. That's this very day. That's the state system now. Collectivists say the state system fails because of the private sector, because the most supportive parents selfishly send their children to private schools. To solve the problem, presumably, they think the government should spread the supportive of parents around more evenly. Now, first of all, before I come to that, let's be clear about the faults of the current system. And again, we probably agree factually about this. At present, parents have formally got a choice of school. Local authorities control the number of school